then you would be able to cash in on that. And the stories that I hear of what people do, I mean, the ways that they cash into it are in many different channels. So if they're in creative roles, sometimes it comes through in the ideas that they come up with. If they're in their career and they're pivoting, it opens the door to say, well, I'm working in healthcare right now, but because of these things that I've read, I know that there's this relationship between healthcare and financial services. Now I can pivot and move my career in a different direction or a different industry, which a lot of people don't do, right? Especially as they get later in their career. It's like, I've got 15 years as a financial expert. Like, that's my channel. That's my vertical. That's it. And there could be real benefit in thinking about whether those skills might transfer to another industry.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck podcast, where we help Gen X leaders who should be at the top of their career, but just don't feel like they are. We give you new ways, fresh ways, authentic ways to do things differently. And this is Erin. I'm the co-host along with Nicole, who's off doing real work today. I get to sit down along with you with an interview I've been wanting to do for months with Rohit Bhargava. And Rohit is the founder of the Non-Obvious company, and he's on a mission to inspire more non-obvious thinking in the world, which I absolutely love. Fits so well with authenticity. He's actually a 3-time Wall Street Journal bestselling author. He has 9 books on marketing, innovation, diversity, and trends, including a #1 bestseller, Non-Obvious Megatrends. And then his new book, The Future Normal, which I've read, is amazing. And he's a major keynote speaker. And most importantly, he loves the Olympics, hates cauliflower, and is a proud dad of boys. And today we talk about all kinds of things. I ask him non-obvious questions, or I did my best to ask him non-obvious questions. And some of the things that you'll hear are, what are some of the biggest unique future trends that he sees coming? And he talks about things like impact hubs and making weather. We'll also talk about why he always eats left-handed. I love this story, even though he's not, and how that's both literal and a metaphor for things you can do differently. Why he thinks most things won't actually be obsolete in the future, and his take on that, which is something you can really use and leverage. Why you should choose the window seat versus the aisle seat on planes. And again, this is both literal, but also a metaphor for what you should do differently. And then we'll also talk about what he observes in most meetings, being the non-obvious guy, but others usually don't, and what you can do differently if you can notice it too. So without further ado, enjoy our conversation with Rohit. I love everything you stand for, total fangirl. But for people that don't know you, tell us about why Non-Obvious company and why you're sort of, centered and obsessed with this concept of non-obvious.
I mean, the short answer is I think the world needs that. I think we all want a little more non-obvious. We all want something that we haven't heard before. We want something new and different. And there's a lot of words we use to describe it: disruption, creativity, out of the box. I mean, whatever cliche you want to use. But for me, what was really interesting was that it became a promise that I put out into the world, that I would come up with something and I would have things to say that people hadn't heard. And it kind of became that reach goal that I eventually turned into the aspirational brand for myself, because I just wanted to be saying something unique.
Yeah. Does it click for people like differently? I know you're saying like where you could put you could put innovation or creativity, but I don't know. There's something about non-obvious that's just different. Do you find that people are like, that just clicks with me different?
They get it. They definitely get it. It's not, it's not a word I made up. I'm not even sure if it is one word or 2 words, or, we go back and forth on whether we should hyphenate it or not. The English major in me is like sort of frantic about that. But the point is, when I say it, people have an idea of what it means. And usually that idea is not too far off from what I mean it to mean.
Yeah. Tell us about your Haystack method. Fascinated. Love it. Tell us how that came about and sort of, do you still do that?
I do. The Haystack Method was my inverse way of taking this cliche of what people think trend forecasters do, which is to search for the needle in the haystack, that one thing that is really difficult to find. And what I called my Haystack Method was sort of doing the inverse and saying, if you spend enough time gathering all this information and talking to people and doing interviews, that's the hay. And the trend that emerges from that is the needle, but instead of searching for it and probably not finding it, you are taking that needle and sticking it on top of the hay and saying, this is what the trend is. This is what the insight is. So it was like a more empowering way of doing that.
Yeah. And you, so tell listeners too, you literally, I mean, some of this from a practicality is you are just constantly combing through periodicals and cutting up papers. And it's very, old school and obviously non-obvious in these modern times. Tell us about that, and how can that inspire, most of our listeners are, in the corporate world, don't necessarily have time to cut up periodicals or travel much. Like, what's the lesson for them in what you do, and how can they translate it to their busy schedules?
The highly visual part of what I do and what I often share in like keynotes and things like that is this tearing out of different things from, like you said, periodicals and this very physical nature of collecting information. What's less sexy, but I also do all the time, is read stuff online. And I save articles and I save stories digitally. It's not that visual to look at, but it's another form of consuming information. And what I try and advocate for people is to get better at being what Isaac Asimov called a speed understander, not a speed reader. Because if you have this constant pressure to be a speed reader, you're always trying to consume more and more and more, and it gets exhausting because you got to manage that with everything else in your life. But if you really concentrate your attention on focusing on the things that are most likely to open your perspective, and you seek out those sources of information, you find that you become better. It's sort of a skill that you develop. You become better at identifying those things that will move your intellect forward.
Yeah.
And I think that I've done that for myself, and that's what I try and help other people do too.
Yeah, I love it. And I feel like I just, I've done that. I have a bunch of your books because you sent me some earlier when we were talking about publishing options. And, I did that with Always Eat Left-Handed. I didn't read the whole book, I'll admit it, but I went through it in Erin way, which is always nonlinear in general. That's my personality. And there's one thing in there, there may be more, but there was one thing, the Daniel Oppenheimer study around plain language, that is so close to what I do in terms of the work I do around authenticity, that one nugget, right, for a 30-minute breeze through is life changing. And so I'm guessing that's kind of sometimes how you do it, and sort of hunt, peck, and sometimes find things without sort of the thoroughness that people think they need. Is that fair?
All the time. All the time. I mean, I think that there's this misconception from anyone who either hasn't written a book or doesn't know any authors, where they assume that every author wants them to read their book cover to cover. And if I had someone who read the book cover to cover, any one of my books cover to cover, and forgot everything immediately, versus someone who breezed through for 5 minutes but took one idea away that changed the path of their career, you could probably guess which one I would prefer, right?
Yeah.
It's not important to me that someone reads my book or any book cover to cover. What's important to me is that they're investing time in generating their own thinking to be smarter and different and helping themselves to stand out. And if what that takes is reading the first 5 pages of a book and taking something away and feeling like, okay, I got the idea and I can do something with this, that's fine.
I think that's so empowering for, again, a lot of our listeners, right? They're so busy, whether it's books or even they're like, I don't even have time to, read my kids like important emails from the teacher, let alone a periodical or a full book. But something's better than nothing. And sometimes that hunting is important. All right. First, non-obvious question, maybe for you. I'm curious, when you're in a business meeting, What are you noticing that you think most others aren't noticing? Is there something?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I've been in a lot of sales meetings as
Mm.
business meetings. And I think when you're in a sales situation, you perhaps pay more attention to the unspoken
Mm.
things that are happening. You're sort of reading the air, so to speak, as some people call it. Sometimes that's the interaction between multiple people, whether one shows deference to the other, what sort of questions they're asking, and what is the question underneath the question that they're
Mhm.
asking.
Mm.
For example, if you're in a business meeting and someone asks you to show them a case study of something that you're proposing, what they're really asking is, this sounds risky. Show me someone who's done this before so that I can feel better about the level of risk involved in this thing. So the more you can read that sort of detail, the more you can answer the question that they're really asking without asking, instead of just asking the question that they actually asked.
Mm.
And I think that's not a skill set that you get a PhD in. It's something that some people are better at because they've honed their ability to pay attention to those sorts of details.
Mm. That's so good. I think part of that's just a little bit of confidence and comfort too, to slow down and not see those questions as a test. Like, I need to answer
Yeah.
it properly. Let me show them the case study, or not freaking out, being like, I don't have a freaking case study, right? But understanding the intent and having the confidence to sort of slow down for a second, pivot, and answer the real question. I think that's
Yeah, and not get defensive about it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really easy in any sort of business situation, especially when you have a presentation prepared and someone interrupts you,
yeah.
to feel like you're being challenged. And I don't see questions as challenges. I see them as engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Like someone is listening enough to want to ask you something, right? Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Like, I don't care enough to actually hate, right? And that's the worst
Right.
because you're irrelevant. If they're engaging with you enough to ask you something, it means they're at least choosing to be to be a participant, and that you can do something with.
That's so good. I think that's a message everybody needs to hear. What do pomegranate seeds and their removal have to do with how people need to think a little bit differently?
I'm a fan of analogies, unusual analogies, I would say. And the pomegranate seed one was one where I remember seeing multiple YouTube videos, or maybe they were TikTok videos that were on YouTube, because I'm old, so I watch it on YouTube, but it was probably originally on TikTok. And it was people showing you all these weird methods for taking the seeds out of pomegranate. Some people cut it into like a lotus flower and open it up. Some people whack the back of it with a wooden spoon. Like everyone has a technique for getting those seeds out of the pomegranate. And my point in sharing that is that there isn't one correct way to do it. There's probably some ways where you lose less of the juice from the pomegranate. There's some ways that maybe are a little bit faster for you. Some ways that are a little more fun, maybe like whacking it with the back with a wooden spoon is definitely the more fun part, unless you whack your front hand, and then that's not so good.
Yeah.
But the point is that lots of people have advice for you on something as trivial as getting the seeds out of a pomegranate. So now imagine how much advice they have for you if you're early in your career, or if you're just graduating, or if you're at one of these moments where everyone assumes that you want their brilliant advice from their brilliant lives. How do you deal with this flood of advice? Well-intentioned advice, but still, how do you deal with that flood of everyone telling you all of these different things and imparting to you all of this wisdom? And now you've got to figure out what to do with it. That's part of the challenge. And I think one of the solutions, one of the answers to that question is by knowing that there isn't one piece of advice that is going to be the one you should follow and the others are wrong. I think you can take pieces from all of them.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, so my next book, The 50% Rule, is around that very concept. And I love one of the quotes that you had in this concept. You say, curation is the ultimate method for transforming noise into meaning. And, I agree. I love the word curation, right? Because it's not just about smashing things together or binary pick one or the other that you think is best for you, but how do you curate, right? How do you make
and it became it did kind of become a buzzword in marketing circles, like, oh, I'm a content curator.
Oh, that's true.
But you know what, the world that it comes from, that if we think backwards, that most of us know it from is museums, right? Museums have curators. And if you think about it on a very simple level, what any museum in the world has to do, they have to take thousands of pieces of art, thousands of things they could potentially put on display in a gallery. And someone has to decide, okay, we're going to show these 100. And the other 900 go in the vault underneath the museum. So that is curation. It's figuring out what to show to tell a story. It's figuring out what is most important. Like that's the element of curation, why I think that's such a beautiful word to describe what all of us need to do.
Yeah. That tough choice. I think of so many of my B2B clients who, choosing to not talk about all the things in their sales presentations and stuff and curating and keeping some of the, I love that analogy.
That's one of the definitions people say for strategy, right? Strategy is what you choose not to do.
What you choose not to do. It's so, so important. Why do you eat left-handed? And what lesson did that give you?
Yeah, eating left-handed was a moment in my life. By the way, I'm not left-handed. So eating left-handed for me was sort of about being at a networking event. It was this moment in my life when I was at a networking event and I hadn't eaten anything and I showed up starving, as sometimes you do. And so my first impulse was to just go and grab food and eat food. And as you're eating, being right-handed, eating with my right hand, and then someone comes up and wants to meet, and then you have to shake hands, it's kind of messy. And this was before the pandemic that I wrote that. Now it's like, even worse, right?
Yeah.
But I realized that if I made this simple switch and I ate left-handed, now anytime anyone came up or I wanted to meet someone, I could very easily shake their hands and feel like I was more open. And so it became an analogy for me to always be open to the conversation because I'm eating left-handed. So I'm always ready for that moment whenever we need to connect with someone else. I'm not head down eating with my right hand. So it was meant to sort of remind people about that.
Yeah. So metaphorically going into something and being like, got to remember.
And now people are sort of like, now I have to be really conscious of it, right? I can't show up to an event and eat right-handed because people are like, oh, I got you.
You literally wrote a book that says always eat left-handed. Yeah, I from this. Yeah. I love that story. It was great. What is the story about? Do you choose a window or an aisle on the plane? By the way, I'm a window chooser. I don't think I knew why, but like what metaphorically, literally and metaphorically lesson does that teach others, to maybe pick the window if you normally pick the aisle?
Well, I usually pick the window because I like to, yes, it's looking out the window and sort of seeing the world outside of the plane, which by the way, I was just on a coast to coast flight last week and the pilot came on and said, we're flying over the Grand Canyon now. And I had the window seat. So
everybody else,
sometimes it turns out great. Yeah. Right. But the point is that I like that isolation also. And it sort of gives me a sense of like being able to kind of see everything that's happening out there. But some people are like, well, I need the aisle because I need to get out faster. I don't want to inconvenience other people. It's high empathy. Or if you have to go to the bathroom multiple times, maybe you take the aisle because you don't want to inconvenience people. So being intentional, I think, is sort of, now I look back and I'm like, it's not all about the window. It's just being intentional.
Hey, Erin here. So I know we talk often about this concept of authenticity as a secret weapon to success. I swear to you, my authenticity was literally the number one thing that helped me become both the CEO of a 9-figure company at the age of 42, but also that helped me lead an insanely successful financial and cultural turnaround of that same company. But I get that authenticity as a secret weapon kind of sounds fluffy, like fluffy unicorn doo-doo that leaves you wondering, what do I actually wake up tomorrow and do differently without looking stupid or getting fired? This is exactly why I put together the Authenticity Playbook for you. It gives you 10 plays or really thought starters that are simple, actionable things that will help you up your career and leadership game. To get your free Authenticity Playbook, go to beauthenticinc.com/playbook. Again, that's beauthenticinc.com, just the letter B, authentic.inc.com/playbook. Or to make it simple, just scroll down to the show notes and we've got you covered with a link there too.
I want to talk about, you have 5 rules for non-obvious thinking and you've got sort of pithy things, but without just going through those, give us the no BS. Like, what does the person listening that has 10 hours of meetings but wants to be a thought leader at the same time, and what are a couple of things they need to do differently tomorrow to be that obvious thinker?
Well, I'll hone in on one of those habits, which is something I call be fickle, which, opposition to, the other ones are sort of be curious, be observant. Like, you kind of get why those would be valuable.
Sure.
But be fickle is this idea that I came upon just through experience, where I realized that if I could identify something that was interesting enough that I wanted to pay more attention to it, but I didn't have time right now to do it, I became really good at saving things for later. And then I would go back to them later. Saving stuff for later and then never going to it doesn't really help anybody, right? But I realized that it was sort of like what some of us might do with our Netflix queue, right? We save stuff as a favorite because then on that Friday night, when we're looking for something to watch, we don't have to scroll endlessly through all of this stuff and have that moment where we spent an hour looking for something to watch and now it's like, okay, now it's too late to start a movie. Instead, we have seen the stuff that we've saved and we can just go back and pick from that. And that to me is part of this idea of being fickle, like saving something for later, getting really good at building your queue, not just for Netflix, but for ideas. So that when you have a chance to come back to it later, you can do what most of us already do with our frequent flyer miles. When you're flying somewhere and you get 1,000 miles, no one takes that flight, logs into their frequent flyer account and says, okay, what can I do with my 1,000 miles? Because you can literally do nothing. You need 25,000 in order to be able to fly anywhere interesting. So what most of us are doing is we're collecting those miles until we reach a certain moment when then we can cash them in. And if we could do that with ideas, we could come up with bigger, better, more interesting things because we're constantly feeding that bank to keep our idea pool.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have an example of a client? Obviously you're incentivized to go back to that because this is what you do. You write books, you keynote speak, you are the future guy, you are the trend guy. Probably a lot of our listeners are like, yeah, that sounds great. And I want to be the thought leader. And even maybe I'm even an executive and I know my role is to be, the future thinker. But man, when I get to that queue, I actually want to go to the Netflix. I'm done with work. Do you have an example of maybe a client or somebody that really started to put in this discipline and sort of what happened for them to, get people to be excited about what it can do for them and their career and their company?
So many. There isn't just one. Like what I hear all the time from people who've gone through this process or done some of these workshops or listened to me speak is that the habit they're really training themselves to do is not, I don't mean to make it sound like you're building up all this homework that you have to do later, right? And you're procrastinating. That's not really the point of this.
Yeah.
The point of this is that you are putting your mind into the sort of frame of reference where you don't shut down when you got to consume a lot of information or when you have to do these things. And you don't shut down when you have so many things to do that you don't have time for just reading, right? Or like the things that you kind of know might be good for you, but you're like, who has the time for that stuff? Like when's the last time you read a novel, who has time for that? And what this frame of thinking does for you is it takes some of that pressure off, right? You don't necessarily have time to work out every day, but you could probably find time to do one push-up, right? And if you put it in your head that I was just going to do one push-up, or the mental equivalent of that, then you would be able to cash in on that. And the stories that I hear of what people do, the ways that they cash into it are in many different channels. So if they're in creative roles, sometimes it comes through in the ideas that they come up with. If they're in their career and they're pivoting, it opens the door to say, well, I'm working in healthcare right now, but because of these things that I've read, I know that there's this relationship between healthcare and financial services. Now I can pivot and move my career in a different direction or a different industry, which a lot of people don't do, right? Especially as they get later in their career. It's like, I've got 15 years as a financial expert. Like that's my channel. That's my vertical. That's it. And there could be real benefit in thinking about whether those skills might transfer to another industry. So it just makes you a little bit more willing to take that extra step or that extra move in a direction that others won't, which helps you stand out.
Yeah, which is the name of the game. I think about, a couple of things for me. I mean, one, I think that's why audio, at least for me, has been so big. I think for so many, right? Whether that's Audible, audiobooks, podcasts, because at least you can twofer, right? You can get that walk or run in or that drive in and do that. I also just think about, the best ideas I've had. I spent 22 years in healthcare. Were never from a healthcare article, right? They were from probably a nonfiction book, maybe not a fiction book, about some other industry doing some other thing, right? So I think even if you just give yourself, a lot of people don't want to do the self-help or feel like some of these books, but those are probably the ones, I don't know, but is that similar for you? Like sometimes it's not even the industry specific, stuff you read and go into. It's really the other stuff that you sort of curate, maybe, I guess, into your industry.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you make these connections between really disparate things and you start to elevate your thinking to the bigger object. Like, for example, one of the people that I'm going to have as a guest on my show later this week that I'm interviewing is the author of a book that is all about pockets, the history of pockets. And I'm going to be interviewing her about her book, and she's in the world of like fashion textile design as a professor. And one of the fascinating things I took away from that book is it was only clothing didn't always have pockets. There was a moment when someone had to design clothing for pockets. And now there's this whole gendered thing around how men's clothing has pockets and women's clothing doesn't have pockets. But back at that time when pockets started becoming a thing, it enabled a whole channel of innovation that didn't exist. Pocket knives, pocket watches, revolvers, like all of these things that you could now carry in your pockets weren't really things before. And I never really thought about pockets as the sort of spark that started a lot of that innovation, but in many ways it sort of was. And so you start to make those connections, and the innovation lesson there is maybe I come up with this beautiful, innovative product, but like I have to wait for people to have the equivalent of the pocket to be able to carry it around before it really takes off.
I love that. That's going to be great. I know you're launching your podcast soon. I can't wait to listen. Okay, let's move forward with like trends. Like I said, I've got the future normal up here on display. We've got your annual trends. First question. In 20 years from now, one thing that's going to be obsolete that none of us realize it's going to be obsolete, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one, because what I see right now, I don't actually think anything. And the reason I say that is because we all see these forces right now of nostalgia continually coming back. Whether it comes to like Super Mario Brothers or like media and entertainment or people listening to music on vinyl. And so like 20 years from now is a generational cycle for nostalgia. So the things that we think might disappear, like, I mean, any answer you might expect a futurist to say, it'll be crazy that we're driving our own cars, right? Like all cars will be automated 20 years from now, except those people who have nostalgia for the cars they used to drive, and they'll still be driving the cars, So like, so whatever it is in 20 years, there'll still be people who are doing that thing. It just might not be common.
Oh, I love that. So as you're designing things, think about the nostalgia factor, and maybe it's not exactly the same thing, but how do you play on that?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I don't think most of us are in the sort of careers or tasked with this challenge of thinking about what is going to be popular 20 years from now to design it right now.
Sure.
Right. So I like that as a framing to think about the world, and I find it fascinating to think in that way. But when it comes to trends and the future and a lot of the work that I do, I sort of describe myself as a reluctant futurist, because my time horizon is usually never that far. It's usually just the next couple of years.
Yep. I love that.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too.
There's a few from the future normal, few trends I'd love to dive into, mostly sort of work related. Impact hubs. What are those? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, impact hubs are really fascinating venues across the world where companies are cohabitating with like nonprofits or groups that are designing for social good. And part of the requirement of having your office in a building that is sort of designated as an impact hub is that you need some level of collaboration back and forth. Your employees need to do service hours with the nonprofit. The nonprofit has to come in and like help you. And so some of these venues are being structured in that way so that the fact that you're in the same office is actually benefiting both of you.
Yeah. Oh, that's very 50% rule-y. I love that. I love that.
Yes,
That'll
it
get
is.
people really thinking, right? How do you do it a little bit differently? Remote work. Everybody wants to know, okay, you're the the futurist guy or whatever you want to call yourself because you're different than a normal remote work.
Yeah.
Be there in the next 10 or so.
Yeah, I mean, remote work will continue. And I think that hybrid work will definitely continue because there are a lot of people who just don't want to be at home by themselves every single day working. Like they want some sort of balance between those things. And there's a lot of people who are like, I'm never going back to 5 days, commuting and sitting in traffic every single day. Like that is crazy for them.
Yeah.
So a hybrid's going to take off. Remote work's going to take off. One of the fascinating things we wrote about, though, is that remote work is going to become possible for the sorts of people who typically did jobs where you would not have thought they could do it remotely. For example, tattoo artists or truck drivers. These are careers where you kind of had to be there. Like you couldn't just be remote and do them. But now with robotics and automation and autonomous driving, in the future, more of those jobs will be able to be done remotely. So now it opens up a whole avenue for more people to be able to do those sorts of jobs working remotely.
So interesting. My husband's not remote at all, but I'm guessing by the time he retires in 12 years, it'll be about the time they'll figure it out. It'll be interesting to see. I remember back when I was in corporate and there was a big push by our corporate CEO. It was very like everything was agile technology and we were getting cool. We were in healthcare. So we were trying to get cool by the Boston hubs and the Silicon Valley hubs and having people all in the office. And I remember thinking by the time we get our poop together, this is of course pre-pandemic, like there'll be like a hologram. We'll all be able to sit in person.
Telepresence.
Like a hologram. So I don't know. Do you think holograms, instead of just Zoom, are we going to get there?
Yeah. I mean, look, I just came from last week. I was at CES and this sort of digital presence was a technology that people were showcasing, not because it was necessarily new, but because it solves a lot of societal challenges. Right? I mean, we can't always afford to travel everywhere. There's a loneliness epidemic that isn't just hitting one age group. It's sort of across multiple age groups.
Sure.
And so if some of these digital telepresence type technologies can help make it a little more real when we're interacting with someone, it opens up the door for more collaboration, more human connection. Even though you're not physically there, you can still connect with someone. And it's not an avatar. It's actually them holographically. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Interesting. I think it can happen, right? I mean, we've got, so much technology that's done bigger things. I do not know what this means, but tell us augmented creativity. I think this has to do with AI and how it can actually make us more creative. I think a lot of people think it could take it away because we just pop in there and ask it to come up with some cute name for something. What do you see?
Yeah, it could take it away in some cases, but what we wrote about in the book, and when I say we, I mean just so people know, I have a co-author of The Future Normal, Henry. So we means Henry and I. Uh, so when we wrote about augmented creativity, what we were talking about is the way that generative AI in particular is being used by people in creative roles, and how it could be a collaborator as opposed to a replacer. And I'll give you an example of what we did because we were writing the book during this time of, I mean, we've been using generative AI for more than a year and been researching it and playing with it. And so in the midst of writing a book and having generative AI really explode and get to the next phase where the tool became better and better, the obvious temptation would be to write the book using AI. And we definitely tried, but it just wasn't good. It wasn't good. However, we collaborated with AI and it was excellent. And the one thing we did, which was really, really useful for us, is that we took a chapter of the book, we fed it into AI, and we asked it to write a 1-star negative critique of that chapter. And based on what it came up with, we were able to identify gaps in our argument, things that might make it stronger, and we made our writing stronger as a result of that. So it didn't do any writing for us, but it helped us to very quickly assess whether the points we were trying to make were landing, whether they were clear to a AI tool, presuming that, you know, if the AI tool was spotting things that were gaps, maybe a reader might as well, and then we could fix them.
That's such a non-obvious way to use AI. I love it. How can leaders at companies, let's say you have a team, you lead a team of 30 people, and how might they use AI in a way that is non-obvious? Any ideas, suggestions?
Well, I did an entire presentation for MailChimp, email vendor, that was all about AI for marketing specifically. And I'm pretty sure that it's like free and available online, so people can just search it up and find it. But one of the things I talked about there is that there are a number of tasks that we need to just get done or get done in a sort of farm it out way that AI tools could be great for, like creating 25 images that are all on the same sort of design style, right? And then playing that out further, or making edits to existing content and doing like the first version of that. I think that what managers need to think about is who on their team, nobody on the team is an AI expert, even if they say they are, probably. So the question is, who on the team has the right mindset to ask the right questions and do the right experiments to see what they get and whether it actually makes the work faster to do. So I'll give you another example. I, just so you know this about me as background, which is important for this particular use case, I studied English. I was an English major, and I wanted to write plays as a playwright and a screenwriter. So that is a skill set I have and a passion that I have. I can write screenplays. I love that style of writing. I wanted to do that professionally at one point, and then I kind of moved into a different direction. That's a different story. But the point is, I know how to do this. When the book came out, we wanted a 2-minute book trailer video. So I needed a script for it. I went to AI. I said, write a 2-minute video script for this book. I gave it the description of the book. It came up with a script for it. Then I said, change this analogy to this, change this image that you're mentioning to this, increase the speed of it, make the cuts for images recommended faster. I did 7 iterations of just telling it, hey, fix this, change that, change that. After 7 iterations, that script that I had, which was still for the 2-minute trailer, I downloaded it. And then I spent 45 minutes kind of fixing it up.
Right.
The whole process took me 90 minutes, as opposed to if I'd done that from a blank piece of paper, which I have the skill set to do, would have taken me maybe 5 or 6 hours. So I took something that would have taken me 6 hours as a professional who knows what I'm doing, and AI as a collaborator allowed me to do it in 90 minutes. So it saved me time. AI didn't write the script, but it also didn't do nothing, right?
Yeah.
It was a collaboration tool that I used to help me get to a better result faster. And I think
it's
that
fascinating.
Yeah, I think that that's not unique to me.
Yeah.
I think that we all have the capability to try things like that.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking about too is the muscles that, back to your point, finding somebody on the team that has the right level of curiosity and asks the right questions. I feel like AI maybe in some ways an unintended positive consequences that it gets us better about thinking about good questions that then we also hopefully help or ask humans, not just AI, right? Like I think that's a skill that it's just something we're not used to doing. So maybe that's going to be, helpful too. Last trend that fascinates me, I want to ask you about making weather. Making weather, we think about the environment, it's doomsday, we're never going to fix it. Tell us about this trend.
Some of you may be familiar with some of this technology that exists out there, like cloud seeding, which is basically putting particles into clouds that have rain. Yeah.
Great.
So the clouds have rain, and when you seed these particles in the clouds, then it forces the rain to happen right now. So the way they've been using it for years now has been for example, billionaire has a daughter who's getting married in Dubai, and they want to make sure it doesn't rain. So they send up the plane for cloud seeding to take all the clouds that are in the sky and make sure that it rains already, so that the clouds are empty, so that there's no rain during the wedding. Now,
beauty.
That's pretty extreme, right?
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing you would expect billionaires to do,
it
right?
poured on my wedding day. I would have loved to have that.
See, exactly. But the point is that the technology exists to be able to do things like that. And the more severe weather we see happening, the more there is going to be a willingness from the world's governments and scientists to start employing some of these technologies. And it comes with, and like some of the trends that we wrote about in the book, it comes with a lot of ethical and really challenging questions. Because if you take a cloud and make it rain somewhere, that means that cloud isn't going to rain somewhere else. So now, like, do you create drought in one place versus, prosperity in another place? Is it being used? Is it being weaponized by certain governments to like make sure that the rain happens over here and not over there? There's all sorts of challenges, right? But it is one of those things that has the potential to dramatically affect the future. Could be positive, could be not so positive.
Right.
And sometimes with the things that we wrote about in the book, that is what we saw.
Oh, certainly. Everything could either be good or it could be evil. It's a matter of how do we govern that, manage that.
So who's in charge of it?
Who's in charge of it? We thought the potential spy balloon was a big issue. Now we're talking about, zero-sum game weather gets a little dicey, a little scary. It's great. Well, I have one more question before I ask you that. Where can people follow you and become more non-obvious?
You can definitely go to nonobvious.com. And if you actually go to that site and subscribe, so nonobvious.com/subscribe, you will get a weekly newsletter from me every Thursday, which is the most fascinating and non-obvious stories of the week. So a lot of what we talked about was, do you really have time to go through all of these stories and read these magazines and do all this stuff? Assuming you don't, I spend hours and hours and hours every week doing it as part of my job. And I try and spotlight the most fascinating things every single week from some of the events that I get invited to go to, things like CES, interviews that I've had, as well as just stories out there. So if you want to get that compilation in a single email, you can subscribe to that and you will get it once a week from me.
Amazing. I don't know how you have the time. It's a great idea. Last question for our leaders who listen to this and like, oh my God, I want to bring this into my team. I know you probably do work. What are some steps they can take, or then what are ways to engage you as well? What can they do sort of tomorrow to build this non-obvious thinking and culture in their teams?
Well, the easy answer is that some of the techniques are in the books. So that's a good place to start. Definitely the email is also a good place to start. I do talks at industry events. So you can go to my website to sort of find out some of the upcoming ones. And also if you want to organize either a private session or sometimes a virtual session, which is a little bit easier to do for your team, I do a lot of those as well. And that's all around non-obvious thinking. So I teach this form of thinking and how to do it. That's what I've taught at Georgetown university. And then I also do like private sessions on occasion on those.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. It was so good to finally get you here on the podcast and share your non-obvious thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.